Can I change that? Please? I don't know how to do that in advanced settings. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Conscious Quilting Live. We have an actual plugged-in microphone this week that will not run out of battery power, so we should not run into the sound issues that we have had previously, I hope. So someone please let me know you can hear me. Hi, Eric. Aw, I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so you can hear me. Okay, good. Let's see. All right, who else we got here tonight? Sound off. Anybody want to chat? Excellent. Thank you, Eric. Here, quick. One day I'll have this all arranged perfectly, but we're just going to keep going. Tonight I am continuing work on my mandala quilt, which I'll do some close-ups of in a few minutes. Been working on this for a couple of weeks now, only during my live sessions while I chat with you guys. And that's been a really fun experience. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been very rejuvenating, you know, being able to connect with you guys while I'm working and creating, and just being able to kind of share my process and my experience with my quilting. Yes, Eric. Suggestion? Okay, thank you for that. I'm not sure what's causing the crackling noise. I will try. Just a moment, please. Sorry. Okay. Let's try. Okay, it doesn't crackle when you're not touching it or the cord. Okay. So how's that now? The sound? Hopefully that's better. Okay. Thank you for that, Eric. Thank you very much. This is my first time doing live with this microphone. My my wireless microphone kept running out of power midstream, and that was useless. So I'm using my plug-in mic that I usually have been, well, not usually, but more recently have been doing voiceover work with. And I've got that plugged into my phone. And I guess as long as I don't touch the cord or the microphone or anything else, hopefully that's gonna work. We'll also see how that works out with the sewing machine running. I don't know. You will have to give me feedback on that. And hopefully we won't have actual feedback on that. Anyway, so we're going to continue work on the mandala tonight. And again, I've been working on this for 3 weeks. And I've drawn in some extra lines that we did not have previously drawn in because I had an inspiration last week for something I wanted to add. So I'm going to start with that tonight while, we're all catching up. Anyone who has any questions or comments while I'm doing this, all throughout the stream, please feel free. This is an open forum. You can ask me questions about the quilting. I'm going to talk about the quilting. Did anybody catch my video that I put up today? The 3 big secrets of free motion quilting. I'd like to hear about that. What you thought of that? Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Donald. So, I'm probably gonna, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom the camera in so you can see better what I'm doing. I'm gonna try and do that without jostling anything or screwing anything up. So let's see how we go. Woo! And that was probably a little more than I wanted, but that's all right. Yeah, that should be good. Oh, hi, Mom. Thank you for joining us. Oh, let's bring that up just a touch without dropping the phone or knocking anything out. See how that goes. Okay, I think that's going to work pretty well for right now. So I've got everything set up. I've dropped my feed dogs on my sewing machine, raised my tension. I've got my bobbins wound. Got my free motion quilting foot on the machine. Oh, it does help when you thread the sewing machine. That's important. Pro tip. Thread the sewing machine before you start quilting. Get that on there and Donald. Yes, my mother's here. Everybody be nice. Especially you, Mom. So this little mandala quilt's been taking on a life of its own for the last 3 weeks and speaking to me as I go. And last week it spoke about these here, putting in these little radiant points off of the curve. Once I get those in, I will probably go in and do some filler work in the curves here and some feather work in the points here. So, and I figured that's probably going to take us through today. I am going to just free motion these points. I'm not going to use a ruler. I used a ruler to draw them, but I'm not going to use a ruler to, I'm not going to use a ruler to quilt them. I'm just going to let it be what it is. We'll see how it shows up on camera. If I need to make an adjustment, I will, of course. I'm going to lock in And just breathe. And again, let me know how the sound is with the machine running and me talking, because I have no idea. So I hope everyone's having a lovely week, of course. I had a rough start this morning. I took a little bit of a spill in the kitchen, and I hurt my toe. I don't think I broke anything, but it hurt like the dickens for a little while. I was rushing through the house because I needed to, and I tripped and went A over T right onto the kitchen floor. That was a lot of fun. That was my start of my day. It got better after that, so that's good. Check in on the sound. Okay. So, Mom, it's good. The sound of the machine with me talking, everything's fine? Excellent. Thank you so much, Mom. Appreciated that. So these radiant points are not going to take a long time. I'm going to bang these out pretty quick. And just so you can have something, well, let's see. I'm going to turn it that way. You should be able to see. So I've gone in and I've just traced this, real quick. Short straight lines I'm okay with. Long straight lines are a disaster and I need rulers. So it's so funny. All the things that I can quilt, straight lines and perfect circles, the bane of my existence. So and I'm trying to be mindful to use all the little tips and techniques that I was talking about today in my video, because I don't want to set a bad example. Because I was called out on that recently. But, you got to do what you got to do. And when it's live, you try to just keep the show going and not do anything too boring. It's here, and I'm not sure what I'm going to fill these points with, if anything, because I know outside of them, I'm going to have, like graffiti quilting is going to be in the negative space when the rest of the fill work is finished. And I haven't decided yet if I'll fill the points or if I will allow them to just stand on their own as a negative space. Give a place for the eye to rest, and that's always good. Okay. Zooming along here. Boop. You may also, well, probably right now you're not going to notice, excuse me. Sorry, folks. I switched back to my open toe free motion foot. On this machine, I've been having problems lately using the closed toe foot, and I haven't figured out exactly what the cause of the issue is. I tend to use the closed toe during my in-person classes because it makes less noise when I'm running the machine and I'm talking, and I don't have a microphone during my classes, so they have to hear me over the machine. And the machine itself is fairly quiet, but there's a tapping sound that comes from the hopping foot. And I feel like I'm competing with it, even if I'm not, because I'm pretty good at projecting when I want to during a class. But I tend to use, the closed toe foot, which is a static foot and does not bounce. I always recommend an open toe quilting foot for anyone newer to free motion quilting because there's less likelihood of the needle striking the foot and causing problems that way. So, but ever since I put this back on the machine, I haven't had a single glitch. Knock on wood. Somebody touch wood, please. And but ever since I put it on, it's been singing along just fine. I was getting all sorts of snags and thread breaks and hang-ups when I was using the closed-toe foot before. I don't know why. No matter what adjustment I made, I was having all kinds of issues. And it's so funny because just before my first live stream, I had had a major thread break and backlash, and I had to disassemble. And I'm not advising anyone who is not authorized to do this, but I had to disassemble various parts of my machine to get all the clogged thread out. And it was major surgery. It was a lot of fun. And I went ahead and gave my machine a good servicing while I was at it because I've been quilting my little heart out on it, poor thing, for the last month. And she needed a good clean out, real good. So there's that. And one more, and then we can get to the fun stuff. I meant to get the outlining done earlier, and as usual, it just didn't happen. But I don't like to spend... Whoa, okay. I don't like to spend too much time on something like this during live, just because I feel like it's not as exciting to watch as the filler work and the fancy stuff. But at the same time, someone out there will probably still learn something watching it, so I guess that's fine. I also think, looking at the screen, it might be a good idea for me to go ahead and zoom that in a little more. And let me do that. We're just gonna work our angle a little bit. Zoom in a bit more. Hopefully the quality's still okay. I'm not sure. That's looking a little blurry. I'm gonna bring the actual camera closer. There. That should be good. Okay. Alrighty. I'm still messing with... Great, thank you. I'm still messing with all the settings for the camera and what works best under what conditions, because live is different than recording, is different than a face-to-face shot, is different than the quilting shots. And that's a whole skill set all by itself, along with editing videos. I tried a couple of new tricks in editing for today's video that I posted, so hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Just wanted to, I'm very experimental right now and very much learning my way as I go for my videos and for the live stream. So there's going to be shenanigans and I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's just like in quilting. This is how you do it. You have to practice. And I tell my students this all the time. If you don't practice your quilting, it doesn't matter anything I say. You're not going to get any better if you don't practice. And it's the same thing for making these videos and doing the live streams. There's all this techie stuff that I am really not a techie person in general, like not on a personal level. And it is absolutely a whole new skill set to learn. And I'm learning it. Some of it's a little slower than others, and understanding what certain things mean and how to use them, and certain features of my camera, certain features of my editing stuff. Hi, Cheryl. We were right here waiting for you. So it's been a lot of fun though. It's been very stimulating intellectually and very challenging, but I think that's been really healthy for me. Doing these videos and doing the live chats and all this stuff that we're doing, it's kind of opening up this whole new world. And someone's going to start singing in the background any minute now, Donald. And but it's opened up this whole new world of things to consider and things to think about that I never had to think about before, Because when I'm quilting and nobody's watching, who cares? But people are watching now. So there's a lot of things that I have to have to learn and do. And I do them. So, all right. So I've got my points quilted in, which means I can brush off my chalk. At least the ones that I don't need anymore. Okay, I'm gonna change my thread color now. Oh, where do we go from here? Time to get the crayon box out, I think. Take a peek. Oh. Wheel of morality. Turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we should learn. Oh yeah, that'll work. Okay. I have this lovely lilac thread that I think is going to be very, very pretty. So we're going to use that. I love lilac. It's one of my favorite colors. Oh, okay, Donald. You want me to talk about marking pencils or chalk? Okay. So, in the world of sewing and quilting, we of course have a myriad of options for marking our fabrics, whether we're talking about sewing or quilting, doesn't really matter. There is of course traditional tailor's chalk, and you can use that, it's fine, although that is like a waxy chalk, and that can be very difficult to get out of certain fabrics, so I wouldn't necessarily make that my first recommendation. Sorry, folks. I'm going to get a sip of water. There's a lot of fabric dust running around in this room, and a lot of batting dust, so I know you're shocked. Let's see here. That's better. I brought it with me, don't worry. Okay, so marking tools. It largely depends upon what material or fabric I am quilting on, i.e. the color. That's your first consideration because you need to be able to see the mark, right? And if you can't see it, it's not going to do you any good. So when I'm working on black or dark fabrics, then I will use a basic chalk marking pencil. The one that I used for this project, I actually got at a certain big box store that doesn't just do crafts, they kind of sell everything. And, at discount prices. And it was like $2. The downside of the $2 pencil is that it marks like a $2 pencil. It marks just fine, actually, but it wears down very, very quickly. So I sharpen the pencil, and after about 3 lines, I'm ready to sharpen it again. So it's not going to last me very long. On light colored stuff, I like to use a wash away pen or an Arrowway pen. I actually prefer the Arrowway just strictly because of laziness, because the Arrowway pens just go away on their own. You don't have to do anything to them. The wash away pen, you really do have to wash the project to get that out. And you'll have to wash it pretty thoroughly to get all of it out. The air away, just the humidity in the air dissipates it over time, and I don't have to do a thing, and I love that. Because I've got other things to do. So, Lord, what am I going to do in here? Okay. I'll let that process. So again, it just depends on the fabric that I'm using. How often do you check the backing? So the question in the question box, how often do you check the backing to be certain all is good on the other side? And worrying about puckers and thread nests. So, unless I'm very sensitive to the movement of my quilt under the needle. If I feel it getting hung up, I know that there is some kind of problem going on underneath of the quilt. And so I'll check then. If I already know that I have a seam, like in the backing, I piece the backing so there's a seam. And I will always be mindful of where that seam is. So if I'm getting hung up there, I know exactly why I'm getting hung up there. It's because of the seam. But I don't habitually just turn it over and check my work at this point. That is largely due to experience. I can feel when there's a problem. I can feel it in the movement of the quilt, and that's when I check if that comes up. And I can say that's only bitten me in the behind maybe 4 or 5 times over the years, not checking. And one time when I was having a problem moving the quilt, I I always keep some sort of a quilt sample nearby to test my stitching, right? Something like this. Put that into the camera view, I think. There it goes. So I have this I have this little sample piece that I can stitch on to test my tension, make sure my stitches are right, make sure I've got everything threaded right before I work on my actual project. Once upon a time, I was working on a large lap quilt. And somehow or another, I lost track of this. And as I'm quilting, it's getting harder and harder and harder to move my quilt under the needle, and I don't know what's happening. And I'm just pushing through it. I'm like, man, this batting is thick here. Wow. And I'm going, and I am McTavishing. I am doing incredibly dense, detailed, swirly work, all in all different directions. Finally, I get through it, and it gets a whole lot easier to move the quilt. And I'm like, that can't be right. I pull the quilt out. This is quilted to the underside of the quilt. That was when I learned to always check when you feel that there's a problem. And I spent the next 3 days of my life picking out all of the quilted stitches to release this from the quilt and try to rescue it. And Donald Finch, that is the quilt that you have. That's when that happened. So, always important to check when you feel there's a problem. That's an important quilting lesson in and of itself. Okay, I finally know what I'm going to do. If you're quiet, it'll come. All right. Get this going here. Doobie-doobie-doo. So, you know, that's how often I check for things like that, is only when I feel like there's a problem. Now, here I'm just putting in some repeating crescent moons, just back and forth across the arcs. It's a nice, simple way to fill the space. Nothing too fancy here. There's going to be plenty of room for fancy later when we get to the outside part, and I've added lots of fancy before this. But this is a good way to fill an arc like this and get the color work in there. And it doesn't take too long, which is nice. Always good if you can find a quick filler that's not terribly tricky to do in a tight space. You know, these arcs are not huge. And yeah, I could have done pearls in them if I really felt like being extra. But pearls are really hard, and I am not in the mood for really hard tonight. So this is what I'm doing. You know, a lot of my creativity gets tempered by how lazy I am. And you know, some days I've got all the pep and verve and vigor in the world. And I'm just like, yes, I'm going to sculpt the Statue of Liberty out of mashed potatoes and then preserve it forever. I mean, whatever. And, you know, I'll get this big surge of creative energy and fire. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do something crazy. And then some days it's this. It's just a little back and forth work just to fill it in, give it some color, and move on with life. Because I got other stuff to do. I'm saving the fancy for those big outer points, because that's going to be a lot of feather work there. And I haven't decided if they're going to be scrolly feathers yet, or regular type feathers, or what they're going to be. We'll get there. Coming up around on the end of this arc here. And I'll go ahead and finish that. Question from Donald. How often do you check the bobbin to make sure it's not running out? Fortunately for me, I have a machine here that actually has a sensor that reads when the bobbin is getting low, and it notifies me. If I keep the lint cleaned out of it, it notifies me that the bobbin's getting low. So I don't actually think about it that much. I always like to have an extra bobbin laying around, so that when that happens, I can just pop the new one in and move on with life. It will run out in the middle of something, because I will run it until it's absolutely empty. No, Mother, you are not calling dibs on this one. I am calling dibs on this one. This is for me. Sorry. I know you love it. You cannot have everything that I do that you love. Sorry. This is going on my wall. I'm making it for me. Thank you. Anyway, getting back... getting back to the bobbin. So you need to learn how much thread and how much quilting goes on your bobbin, like how far your bobbin will go. And that's different for a lot of different machines. Donald, your machine and mine both take the same size bobbin. And so when you sit down at your machine and you start playing with quilting on it, you'll get a feel for really how much sewing it takes to wipe out, or how much quilting or whatever, how much it takes to wipe out a bobbin, and you'll start to get a sense of that. But it just takes practice and time. And I mean, if it runs out, it runs out. Don't worry about it. Just pop a new one in and keep going. No reason to fret about it. I don't really worry, you know. You have to get good at clean stops and starts, because your thread will run out, your bobbin will run out in the middle of your quilting, and that is the way life is, you know. Bobbins run out, souffles don't rise sometimes, bread doesn't rise sometimes. You have to just pick up your feet and go with it. as much as you can and just breathe. Gotta breathe through it. I talk about breath work a lot in the video I put up today and its relation to good free motion quilting. And it's really such an important thing to do good breath work while you quilt and to think about your breathing and to stay centered in your body and to try to stay present with your quilting and with yourself and just kind of breathe and flow with it. Again, I approach my quilting as an active meditation, and breath work is a big part of meditation. It really helps to get your mind focused and get your nerves to settle down a bit, and it will help you with smooth quilting. Most importantly of all, it will help you with smooth quilting and help you to control your fabric more smoothly. So, very, very important, the breath. Let's see. We're coming around here and almost finishing up this arc right on the end here. And we'll move to the next one. All right, cut that. And move on to the next. Can you all see what I'm doing okay, or do we need to get a closer shot? I would like to know that, please. Okay. I will get us closer. Something you all need to understand about me telling my mother no, she cannot have this quilt. My mother has an entire room that is basically a museum of my quilting in her house. Like every wall and partition is covered. It's like a giant refrigerator with all the finger painting hung up on the walls all over her first floor of her house. And she's a quilter herself. She's got her own quilts. She does not need all of my quilts hanging up in her house. It's just not the way it needs to be. And I mean, I know it's a compliment and I appreciate it so much, but you know, you can't have all of them. Some of them have to be for me. Okay, that should be good. Closer shot for all of you. Yes, I did. I absolutely did tell you that, Cheryl. That I was making this for me. But Mom wasn't here for that one. So I don't think she heard that very well. All right. Ooh, okay. Let's see how this goes. So we're cruising along here and filling her in. And of course, these 4 arcs that I did around this, you can't necessarily tell from this angle, but they're not all actually the same thickness, unfortunately. I didn't have the right kind of arc to make those all exact in my ruler arsenal. And that's something I'll have to work on for the future. But it's all right. When this is all done, I mean, all those little imperfections and stuff, they're all going to go away. They'll just disappear, I hope. And if not, that's okay. That's part of what gives it character. As I try to be the Bob Ross of quilting, the land of happy little trees. Um, I don't need my work to be perfect. I do like to get things done. If I start a project, I really, I've got a lot of false started projects sitting in my sewing room that are just sitting there waiting for me to get them done. And so I'm happy that I'm actually getting, you guys are keeping me to the grindstone here. Because if I wasn't going live every week working on this, it might not get finished. But now I have accountability. And so that that has really changed my whole work dynamic for quilting now that I have accountability. And so that's been a good motivator, and that's been wonderful. So I really, I'm so glad to have y'all here. I'm glad you're watching, and I'm glad you're enjoying this. I'm glad that you're asking questions that hopefully I can answer for you, and not bore you to tears here. I definitely want this to be fun and educational, edutainment. I am trying to taper these arcs a little bit into each other. But I'm also noticing, Mom, you had mentioned that this quilting's making them look three-dimensional, and I didn't see that until you mentioned it, so thank you for that. Again, I haven't stepped back and looked at this since I started doing these arcs. But this part is kind of like Zentangle, where you do make things look three-dimensional while you're drawing and sketching. It's pretty cool. I dig it. So now I'm doing less of that tapering because that actually... Oh, so sorry. That's what I was worried about. I'm a little too close to the table. Little mishap. It's okay. Thankfully, nothing fell over. Whoops. So we're almost done with these arcs, thankfully. And then we'll get on to something a little more fun, I think. Because we're going to go into the feathers in the outside points. And there we go. Okay, the arcs are done. Yay! Education on how to use YouTube. That's a really good point, Cheryl. Well, when I feel like I have enough expertise to address that myself, I will do that. However, I'm not there yet. I'm going to pull back a little bit so that you guys can get the overall effect of this before I continue. So let me just... Oh, wow, yeah, that looks great. Okay. Zoop. And zoop. I also need to take a quilty break, so... just for my shoulders and whatnot. but I want to make sure that you can see all of that. I think you can. Yeah, that's cool. I love this. This has been such a fun project, and you guys are part of why it's been so much fun. So I do want, oops, I do want to thank you for that. I want to thank you guys for being here with it. This has just been a good time and a very nice adventure. Man, oh, that came out so good. So good. Sometimes sometimes it just gets really exciting, just, when you step back from it and it hits you. Because when you're actually quilting and you're zoomed in on it, you're just looking at what you're doing, and kind of your peripheral vision just kind of narrows down to that really focused awareness. And so you can't really see the impact that's being made by what you're adding to the piece until you pull back from it and look at it. I love this so much. This has been such a nourishing project, and I absolutely adore it. Now, I don't know if you all will see this on cam. I'm not sure that you will. In my long points that I've stitched in, there is a line running up the center that is probably going to wind up being my feather stem. Aw. Yeah, Deb. It's a great motivator to get you sewing. Start a YouTube channel, put yourself out in public where everybody's watching you work. You will work. It's a great motivator. All right, I'm going to move this around. Now, of course, for what I'm doing here, I'm working on corners, which means that I've got corners going into the throat of my machine. That can get a little adventuresome. Always make sure that you flip those corners up and not down so that you don't quilt them to the back of your quilt, because that would be bad. I'm going to zoom this back in so you guys can watch what I'm doing. I just needed to take that little quilty break and let you guys see the impact. Do that impact shot. It's so funny too, because like to the right of my sewing machine, I have my very ancient antediluvian laptop, the Methuselah, and that does not give me a very good sense of color at all, or picture. Ooh, doggies, sorry. Zoom in. Or picture quality, So when I look there, it doesn't look as good as it does when I'm looking at my phone. And the phone looks pretty good. So hopefully you guys are having a lovely visual experience doing this. Actually, let me... Sorry. I just got to get this angle right. Okay. Stable. Very good. So now we move on to this part here. I've got 4 of these to fill. Oh yeah, everybody. Eric, the crafty cub, shout out. If you have any interest in crochet, the Crafty Cub does amazing crochet work and has a streaming channel. He's got his own channel on YouTube, but he does his streaming over on Twitch, and he absolutely does amazing work. Totally worth checking out. So his channel is The Crafty Cub. Now what I found is If you just type in the Crafty Cub, it takes you somewhere called the Crafty Club, and that's not him. So if you type in it's hard to say, Eric, the Crafty Cub Crochet, then it brings him up. And he's got oodles and oodles and oodles of live streams from Twitch that he's brought over to YouTube that you can watch. And they're entertaining, they're educational, and they're fun. And he is a very talented crocheter and a very dear friend, and I absolutely adore him. So, Eric, there's your shout out, there's your commercial. So, we are going to get on to our... Oh yeah, good point. Thank you, Eric. It is 18 plus, so if you're sensitive to certain things, be aware of that before you go check it out. I forgot about that, Eric. Thank you. So, we are going to make some magic happen over here. Oh, Lord. Color change. I need to pick a new color. I can't just go with the same one. Just going to have every color in the rainbow. I've got some purple, I've got some red, some green, some yellow, some lilac, some blue. What haven't I put in? Oh, chartreuse. No, not chartreuse. I always threaten to put chartreuse into things. It's just entertaining to me to see the look on people's faces and watch them blanch. Oh, let's see here. Oh, ooh, peachy. I like it. Okay. So I'm going to do some feather work in these points, and I think I'm feeling a little more traditional. On a black background piece, Mom, in the chat box, my mom has recommended deep purple. However, when I'm working on a black background, the deep or dark colors are just going to disappear. You won't see them. So something like Grammy cakes, I just got that. Yes, the aubergine. I do love aubergine, as you well know. However, I'm not putting aubergine into this quilt. I try to avoid doing deep or dark colors on a black background because they'll just disappear. And then I'm doing all that work basically for nothing. And I had enough of that when I did black thread on black fabric, so I'm not doing that. I think I might try turning on my needle light and see how that does for the visual. Boop. Let me see how that looks on screen. Just trying to give you guys the best visual experience. I'll try it for this one. We'll see how it looks. It'll probably make the thread that I'm using pop out. It's kind of peachy. So we'll see how it goes. All right, quilting. All right, lock that in. And like I said, I think I'm gonna try. Ooh, okay. Go for it. I'm going to start with this. And bring this around. Fill this area. That gets me started. I'm going to also fill in here. Well, that gives a nice little bow effect, doesn't it? That's cute. I think you're going to see it better without that light. I'm going to turn off the needle light. We'll see. And then I'm just going to do more traditional feathers. My bump back feathers. This is a method of doing feathers that I really like because it really cuts back on the thread buildup and you wind up having a lot fewer problems with your feathers that way and with the thread buildup. I'm not using a particularly heavy thread. Whoop, whoop. And I'm just doing one side at a time right now, which is usually my habit when I'm doing feather work. I'll do one and then I'll go back and do the other. And I usually don't obsess about keeping the feathers perfectly even. That's just negativity nobody needs in their lives, you know? Certainly I don't. And, you know, yeah, I do try to balance them out, but I don't freak out about it if they're not perfect. You know, it's quilting. At the end of the day, you know, we're making a blanket of some sort. So, okay, the extra light was better for you guys. Then I will do that. But yeah, don't, you know, try not to stress yourself out about, you know, making things matchy-matchy. That's just not a thing that I do. Now, I know there are some quilters out there who are really, really good at making things matchy-matchy all the time, and bless them. You know, I can't relate to it, but blessings to them. That's cool. I'm going to keep building this feather out. And I may need to go back after I do these feathers, and that probably won't be actually during stream. And I may go and echo this straight line just to give a little more definition to this before I go into the graffiti quilting, which is probably going to happen next week and may actually wind up being the last stream for this project. I don't know. We'll see how far I get with it. Now my center line just ran out. So now I'm just completely winging it and praying a lot that I'll do this right. It'll be okay. It will be fine. Tiny, 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 tiny feathers. Okay. And I'm gonna actually cut and go back to the beginning there. All right. Instead of backtracking the whole line, because I know I'm gonna be traveling along this anyway as I build the other half, I just decided to go ahead and cut the stitch and bring it back up here, because I think that makes a little more sense. All right, do the other side. One of the things I love about feathers is there's such a pretty way to fill a space really quickly. You know, because of course we all want to get our quilts done as soon as possible, and a finished quilt is far more important than a perfect quilt. Not that I've ever seen a perfect quilt in my life anyway, but you know, I see people, they just get analysis paralysis and they're terrified to quilt their quilts because they're afraid they're going to mess them up, and I understand. I mean, honestly, that anxiety never really leaves you. I've been quilting for 18 years, and every time I sit down to quilt something I pieced, or when I was quilting for people, and, you know, they had pieced it and they wanted me to quilt it for them, oh, terrible anxiety about it. You know, it never really goes away. So you just kind of have to keep going, do your best, do the hardest thing you know how to do, unless you're feeling lazy, and then go lazy, you know, whatever. I'm not going to judge you for that. And but get her done, you know. That's the quilting style that really matters the most, because most of us are not making quilts to go hang up at the Houston Quilt Festival. I'm not. I have no interest in competition quilting at this point, and you know, I would never send just my own piece to one of those shows. Several pieces that I quilted got sent to those shows, but I wouldn't do that myself. I just don't feel the need to do that on an ego level. So there's a feather. Looky, looky what I've got. Pretty, pretty feather. I'm gonna try to position that. Ooh, stop moving the camera, I'm sorry. Position that where you can see it. Oh yeah, there we go. And very nice. Very, very nice. Cool. Really getting a pretty good turnout tonight for viewers. I really appreciate you guys showing up, whether you're feeling chatty or not. I love that you're here. I can see you. I've got 12 people in the room right now. And, you know, some people have come and gone since we've been on. I got to check the time, too. Okay. It's 8 o'clock, so we've got about a half hour. I'm going to move this and try not to bump the camera this time. Sorry. Flip that out. This is always the fun part, of course, and I say fun very tongue-in-cheek. The fun part of quilting on a sewing machine versus a quilting machine. Throat space, right? And when we're working with a quilt that's at all larger than the throat space that we have been granted by our sewing machine, you know, it's challenging. You have to roll up your quilt, you have to accordion fold it, all kinds of stuff. And you just have to roll with it. Do your best. So I'm bringing these curls around again. That was a little less than perfect, but whatever, I'm over it. Put that in there. And let's build out our feather. So I'm bringing that up. Backtracking. And then bump back. These are bump back feathers. There's a few different things you can call these. But, you know, bump back is a pretty common name for them. And it involves the least amount of backtracking and thread play in feather work that I've seen, or just about the least, actually, because hook feathers actually have the absolute least, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. That'll be a video at some point. And but I do like eliminating as much of the backtracking and thread play as possible, just so we don't get a big buildup of heavy thread in the stem. You know, especially if we were working with thicker threads, that would be a serious, serious issue. I'm working with 40 weight embroidery thread at the moment, and with embroidery thread, it's not quite as noticeable as it would be with a 40 weight quilting thread. For some reason, it just has to do with the way it's spun and the way it's made and the way it just winds up. When you're working with pure cotton, of course, that's going to be fluffier. It's going to be bigger, thicker than just if you're using regular, you know, shiny embroidery polyester thread. So that's all stuff that we have to learn and play with and practice. And usually in a bed quilt, I would only use cotton thread. This is, of course, an art quilt. It's a wall hanging. As far as I'm concerned, on an art quilt, anything goes. You know, you do whatever you want on an art quilt. I've seen art quilts that were made from literally trash pulled out of trash cans and sewn into a quilt. It's kind of the New York quilting community there. Um, but they do amazing art quilt work in that community, and it's a very big deal. Thank you, Grammy Cakes. Um, there's an art quilter in New York named Ben Venom, and I don't know if he's still active or not. But he's kind of a rock and roll quilter, and art quilter. And there's very much obviously a certain amount of shock value to his work, I think, or at least some New Yorkness. And that's fine. That's great. I value that. I have no issue with that. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, certainly, and a more traditional quilter might scoff at some of his work, but the modern quilting community and the modern art quilting community, which I think is kind of a subset of, that modern quilting community, they've really, they had embraced him, at least as of a few years ago. I don't know what the current status of that is. But I know at one point he had done something like a 20-foot long quilt that was meant to be hung from like some tall ceiling because it was going to be, an art installation. And he had this kind of smallish Bernina sewing machine, and he jammed every inch of that quilt through that machine to get it quilted, which I'm just like, whoa, mad respect for even attempting, much less completing a project like that. Because the artist in my heart is like, yeah, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. And the practical side of me is like, I don't think so. No. Where am I going to put it? No. So, all right, there's another feather. Ooh, 18 folks in. Hello, everybody. If you're new to the room, welcome in. Working on my mandala quilt here. I'm going to take a stretchy break, but I'm going to go ahead and back the view out so you guys can see what we've been doing. Let me, zoom out. And turn that. So this is the mandala quilt. So far, so good. I'm going to pull this out a little bit so you can see. Sorry. I keep hitting my light with my hat. That's the thing that's happening. So this is coming along nicely here. I've got my feathers on the outside points. I've got this all quilted in here. That is coming together really, really nicely right now. And of course, wow. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Yay. I'm having a good old time with this. All right, let me zoom back in. A little more smoothly this time, I hope. And slight adjustment here. Okay. Maybe zoom out just a touch. There's no fine control on that zoom, sorry. All right. Back to work. Yeah, yeah. Eric H., I got the joke, so, you know, I'm right there with you. All right. I'm gonna get these last two feathers banged out. That's probably gonna do us for the night, I imagine, getting these feathers in. We lock that stitch in. Bring this up and around in a curl. Little feather. Same thing over here. Curl. Little plume. And rock and roll. The tricky thing when you're working, you know, on a mandala type deal and you're trying to keep the overall piece balanced is, like, I can't look at the other piece, the other feathers that I've done at the opposite corners and quilt this at the same time. So I'm just winging it on keeping them basically the same size, like the plumage of the feather and things like that. I'm trying, and there's going to be some variance, but I've worked some projects where, like, on one end I'd have really skinny, long feathers, and then I get to the other side, and I accidentally did really kind of chunky, fat plumage, and that did not work out so good. Oh, yeah, winging it. That's a good joke. Totally unintentional, Eric. So, yeah, you know, you're always trying to keep things balanced and make sure that things that are diametrically opposed in the piece are balancing each other out somehow. You know, it's actually easier if they're not the same motif, of course, because then they can be whatever they are and nobody can say anything. But when you're doing feather work, that's a bit more challenging because, yeah, you know, you would want to have all the same kind of feather, the same style of feather, unless that was, you know, artistically a decision you made that they wouldn't be the same, and then that's okay too. And if you screw up, you can always go back and say, I meant to do that, leave me alone. And if they don't agree with you, they don't have to look at your work, and that's fine. You know, people who nitpick my work don't get to see it again. And that's just the way it is. You know, it's not that I can't take constructive criticism. I can, but I'm usually full of that. So I don't usually need it proffered to me unasked. You know, on every little thing that I do. There's too much of that in my life in certain areas anyway, so. All right, cut that thread. Yes, Eric, you're a very punny guy. All right, let's get the other side here. And cruising around, getting this other feather. Whee! I love doing big elongated feathers like this in a triangular space. I've used this technique in some of my white work quilts to great effect, and I've always enjoyed the look of these long kind of stiletto feathers. You know, they look like just a sword of feathers or a dagger of feathers. And there's something about that imagery, I guess, with like angels as warriors of light or something like that, that just really appeals to me. You know, when a feather can become a weapon, or a weapon can be turned into a feather, you know, it can kind of go either way. So I think there's something about that, about transforming, something that would be an instrument of violence into an instrument of peace. You know, I think there's something about that in the artist in me trying to speak through my work. Unfortunately, the artist in me doesn't really just talk to me in English. It's all arising from my unconscious mind. So I have to get a translator or translate it myself. And I just knocked something off my table. I hope it wasn't important. All right. We got one more big long feather to do. And it's about 8:12. So I'm thinking we're going to run till about 8:30, or, you know, unless you guys have other questions or thoughts, things you want to talk about, which I'm open to sticking around and doing that, but quilty wise, I'll probably stop quilting at 8:30. Again, I do appreciate all of you who have shown up here this evening very much. It's very encouraging to me just to see, frankly, people showing an interest in my work, and a desire to kind of interact while I conjure weird things with thread and fabric. And it's really fun, and it feels like a social time to me, which I don't really do real life social time. I kind of have an issue with that. Some social anxiety stuff. Big groups are always bad for me. I cannot deal with big groups. So, but this is a safe space for me to interact with a number of people simultaneously, and I'm very relaxed, and I'm very at peace, and I'm very in my power and in my zone, and that works really well for me. So thank you for that. And I know that some of you can more than relate to that statement about the social anxiety. And I'm not outing anyone. And, you know, it's all good. There are many of us who come to sewing and crafting and quilting and all of this due to some issue or another, whether it's emotional or physical or mental, and it helps us to kind of put the pieces back together. I always loved the metaphor of quilting, because of course you're taking great big pieces of fabric, cutting them up into tiny little pieces of fabric, and then putting them back together into big pieces of fabric. And you know, sometimes life does that to us. We go through experiences that tear us into tiny little pieces, and then we have to put ourselves back together. And that's exactly what I went through when my father passed. And it took a very, very long time, and it's still a work in progress, as some people could mention, but they won't, because this is a public forum, Mother. And, you know, we have to just keep on keeping on. But this is a great way to, you know, have that therapeutic effect of that crafting and it's very, very helpful to me, at least. And it was a lovely thing. It was a gift that came out of my father's passing and my grief over that. This was the treasure that emerged from that. And I think it's true, and I am not trying to go to a place of toxic positivity at all. Terrible things happen, and sometimes they are just terrible. But human beings are resilient creatures, and we are adaptive by nature. So generally speaking, even if the worst possible thing happens to you, some gift is going to come out of it. You will evolve something because of that thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging and honoring that. And I don't think that is toxic positivity. My dad died and it sucked and it hurt and it really destroyed me for almost a decade of my life. And the grief from that did destroy a lot of important relationships in my life that I'll never get back, ever. And that's just the way it went. I lost a lot because of that. But I did gain something from it, something that is sacred to me, something that I do consider to be holy, and that is my gift of quilting. And I enjoy doing it. I love having it as an artistic avenue. It works really, really well for me, and I love it. And I'm actually loving it a whole lot more now, being able to share it with a lot more people than I could before. And that's all because of you guys. So thank you so much for that. And that is the last feather. I'm going to zoom that out so you guys can see that. We're going to pull back here. Oh, Lord. Oh, diddly. Okay. Sorry about that. So here is our lovely mandala. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust this and then I'll hold it up so you can see it flat. I think that's going to be good. So let me just make a little adjustment here. Okay, and a little more. There we go. There we go. So let me hold this up so everybody can see it. This will take just a moment. All right, I'm going to bring it closer, or try to. Hopefully this is going to work. We'll see. Probably going to lose some of it there. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Yay! That's so cool. All right, so next week, next week, I'm going to be working in the outside, the negative space of the quilt. So, bear basically everything outside of what I've already done out here is my plan. This I'm probably going to do in just graffiti quilting, like real graffiti quilting, was just chaos. I love that. Probably in a dark gray thread, but I'm going to kind of be with it and decide what that's going to be. I got to go through and trim some threads and hit this thing with a lint brush for sure, because it is covered. I'm probably in the off time. I'm probably going to go in and echo these lines, just the big ones, probably not the little ones. I'm saying that, and there's a voice in my head saying, yeah, you're going to do the little ones. Okay. We'll see. I just do what the voices in my head tell me to do. And put that up again. This is very cool. So much fun. So much fun. Does anybody have any final questions or thoughts or want to talk about anything with this? Leave that where it is. This has been so much fun to work on, and it's been so much fun to work on with you guys. Next week should finish this piece out. So after that, in my own off time, I will trim it up and bind it, and I will make sure that you see the finished final project, probably hanging under good lighting, whether I just take a picture or I show it on live. This is a thing that came up recently while I have at least a little group of you going. Well, now, Cheryl, if I make one for you, what's my mom gonna say? Anyway, that will start a fight. We were not having that. Something that came up recently, there is on my YouTube channel, if you go to the main channel, and someone had asked earlier about navigating YouTube, if you click on the Conscious Quilting circular image, right, and you go to my main page, some of you may see a community tab and some of you may not. I don't know why that is, and if somebody does know that, if you could let me know, that would be great. I know that some people can't see it, and some people can, and I don't know why. But there is a community tab, at least from my view of the channel. And even when I'm not signed in, I can see it. And in that community tab, I'll put up little blurbs or just a quick post, a little thank you, or a milestone, or this is coming up on this date, and things like that. So if you have access to the community tab, use it, check it. If you haven't clicked notify, if you're a subscriber and you haven't clicked notify on your YouTube, on that channel, it won't necessarily notify you when things pop up. But if you click notify, it will. I'm still learning the ins and outs of YouTube myself from the perspective of a creator. The video I posted today, I had my fingers crossed because there were a couple of little things that I put in there that I was not sure if I was allowed to do that, but I got away with it, so I guess I'm okay. And yeah, I just wasn't sure. The rules are not very clear on certain things, so. But I'm always trying to learn new stuff with this, and I am constantly working to improve the quality of my content, the quality of my videos, and the quality of my live streams. And hey, no audio issues this week. All right. So Um, so we are wrapping up here. It's about 8:26 Eastern Standard Time. Um, Cheryl, you asked, how about the size and directions for how to draw the pattern? I, I mean, could I really reproduce this if I really set my mind to it? Yes, of course I could. Actually, writing up the pattern and the directions would take me an inordinate amount of time because I'm terrible at tech writing. I have tried to do that before on other patterns back in the past, and it was a disaster. So, but basically, the nuts and bolts of what I did, okay, so the nuts and bolts of what I did with this piece, I took a big square of fabric. Um, I think it's about 40 by 40. I don't remember. It's been 3 weeks. But it was about 40 by 40. I folded it into quarters. I pressed the creases in so I'd have a nice clean crosshair to work from. Excuse me. And then I started drawing in all of my basic framework. Excuse me. And so I have rulers, of course. Who among us doesn't? I'm getting a lot of batting dust right now. I'm sorry. But I've got all these rulers, and I just eyeballed what I wanted to do and kept repeating patterns. So I used my different rulers to create the different petals and just built it out. That's basically it. All right, folks, that's it. It has been lovely being with you. Thank you. I'm choking on this batting, so I am going to go ahead and end the live, but I very much appreciate you all being here. And we had a lot of people come through the room tonight. It was wonderful. So I will see you next Tuesday. Take care.